Today's meeting at Lancaster House was no ordinary diplomatic gathering. It was a collective thundering of European resolve. A summit convened to confront the threat to continental security by Russia. And that threat is real. But behind the Polish doors of this elegant London venue lies a sense of profound urgency. David Lammy, the UK's Foreign Secretary, assembled key figures from Germany, Poland, Spain, France, Italy, and the EU to reinforce pressure on Vladimir Putin and to prepare for the high-stakes summit between the Prime Minister Keir Starmer and European leaders next week. The so-called Weimar Plus format, born last year out of necessity rather than tradition, met for its sixth session today. Originally inspired by the Franco-German-Polish cooperation, the format now functions as an agile diplomatic spearhead capable of coordinating action without the bureaucratic inertia of wider NATO or EU processes. Its agenda: European rearmament, sanctions, and the diplomatic choreography needed to push Russia to a ceasefire. David Lammy made the stakes unambiguously clear. This is not just about Ukraine, it's existential for Europe as a whole. And that phrase, existential, is not hyperbole. Russian aggression now tests not only the borders of Ukraine, but the very idea of collective European security, the rule of law, and sovereign equality. The ultimatum issued at the weekend by the so-called coalition of the willing, Starmer, Macron, Merz, and Tusk, was stark: a 30-day unconditional ceasefire, or Russia faces a new round of massive sanctions. Britain is already following through with sanctions on Russia's shadow fleet and key enablers of its invasion. Kaja Kallas, the EU's foreign policy chief, was characteristically blunt as well. We must keep up the pressure. Russia is playing games. Of course Russia is. But the Russian response has been interesting. On the one hand, tepid, also slippery, but also relatively fast. Putin has proposed talks, but with no ceasefire, no clarity, no moral reckoning. Instead, he's offered negotiations in Istanbul on Thursday, a move many interpret another theatrical feint. Enter Zelensky, and today, in a move of deep symbolic relevance and resonance, he has placed a call to Pope Leo XIV, and this was no perfunctory conversation. It was an invitation with the potential to reshape the moral landscape of the war. I invited His Holiness to make an apostolic visit to Ukraine. Such a visit would bring real hope to all believers, to all our people. And remember, of course, the Pope is responsible for the Ukrainian Union Church. That's the church which looks Orthodox, is very much based in Ukraine, but is under the Papal See. This appeal is profoundly strategic. A papal visit to Ukraine would be more than a gesture. It would serve as the ultimate bridge, one that spans the gap between secular diplomacy and the world's conscience. And should Pope Leo accept and further continue that journey, let's say, to Moscow, it would be an historical and theological masterstroke: peace through presence, reconciliation through proximity, and it isn't something that could be conducted on a midnight train from Poland. This is a far cry from Pope Francis's clandestine train ride across the Polish border. This would be overt, symbolic, and crucially impossible to ignore. Complicating matters is President Trump, whose skepticism about Kyiv's willingness to negotiate veered dangerously close to blaming the victim. While Trump urged both sides to meet immediately, his comments betrayed a misunderstanding or a deliberate misrepresentation of Zelensky's strategic offer. Ukraine is ready but not foolish. Peace must begin with a ceasefire, not a reward for further carnage. The UK, under Starmer's leadership, is trying to square the Atlantic Circle, remaining close to Washington while binding itself tightly to Europe. Today's meeting underlines Britain's post-Brexit reality. It must show relevance and leadership, not as a bridge, but as a cornerstone of European defence. And Zelensky's call to meet him in Istanbul is, of course, absolutely brilliant. Zelensky will go there, ceasefire or not ceasefire. And if Putin doesn't come, then that is a demonstration, yet again, of Putin's cowardice and his incoherence. But then the problem here, again, is always with Putin. Which Putin are we dealing with? Today's gathering at Lancaster House was about more than sanctions or ceasefires. It was about shaping the future European order. It was about rejecting appeasement. It was about solidarity and about strategic clarity. And meanwhile, Zelensky's call to Pope Leo XIV is something else entirely, a theological overture, a moral crescendo that reminds us that war at its worst is a spiritual failure as much as a political one. Should the Pope walk the streets of Kiev and then Moscow, it would be the most powerful procession since John Paul II visited Poland in 1979 and shook the Soviet Empire's foundations. The question now is simple. Will the world seize this moment, or, as too often before, will it let it pass in cautious whispers and closed-door negotiations? The answer perhaps begins today at Lancaster House, but it may culminate in Rome, and it would be demonstrated in both Kiev and Moscow, whatever happens.